What we do know is this, regards Chelsea. Chelsea mob-handed in Lisbon right now. Medical staff are there. A plane is there waiting to get the deal done to bring Argentinian World Cup winner Enzo Fernandez to London to join Chelsea in a deal that could rise to £115 million. So we're currently in this window at £511 million. A third of that is Chelsea. So that would catapult Chelsea's spending to about 300 million quid. In the two windows gone by, this one and the previous one, their spend will be £500 million if they land Enzo Fernandez. And there's nothing to suggest, having triggered the release clause, that they won't do that. They're on the money to do that. Football finance expert, author of Price of Football, Kieran Maguire joins us, Simon. Kieran, good morning. It's a question for you and it's a question for Simon. Regards FFP, how in hell's name are Chelsea doing this?
Well, what Chelsea have done is that they've secured players on long-term contracts. And under the accounting rules, if you sign a £50 million player on a 3-year contract, you spread the cost over the life of the contract, so that'd be 16 or 17 million pounds a year. If you spread it over an 8-year contract, then it drops the cost to 6. And Chelsea have done this repeatedly. So they've taken advantage of what might be seen as a bit of slackness in the FFP and accounting rules. But when they sell a player, all of the profits of the sale go into the accounts immediately. So if they sold Conor Gallagher today for 40 million and they've got players coming in on 7-year contracts, that would allow them to spend 280 and it'd be a net zero as far as FFP in the transfer market was concerned.
Right. Well, Kieran, Simon doesn't believe that long contracts are any kind of loophole. Do you?
No, that they're not a loophole. It's an investment. And Chelsea believe that these players are going to increase in value over the years. So that means in 2 or 3 years' time, should the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona come a-calling, then you've got the likes of Mudryk still with 5 years remaining on a contract. So Chelsea, in theory, should be able to generate maximum sales value from the players, provided they're good. The downside is what happens if they're another Winston Bogarde or similar players who haven't delivered.
But if that's the case, Kieran, now come to Simon in a second. Why are Chelsea seemingly the only ones who are doing this?
Because Chelsea are taking a very big risk. Other clubs tend to look at the maximum amount of commitment. They know that player values cannot be guaranteed indefinitely, and therefore they don't want to commit themselves for 7 to 8 years. It also ties up spots on your 25-man squad for significant periods of time, and the other owners don't seem keen to want to go down that particular route.
You're nodding in agreement with Kieran.
Well, yeah. I mean, Kieran, I spent a lot of time talking to Kieran because he's one of the most intelligent financial guys around football. So I sense check things with Kieran. So we'll be in the same space about a lot of things. Todd Bowley is the only guy who's bought a football club for £2.5 billion. So it's not surprising, albeit private equity money behind him, it's not surprising that the manner in which he's operating has a different feel and look about it. It's one thing the Glazers coming in, putting 200 million quid down, gearing the rest of Man United and getting Man United bought with their own money. It's another thing using private equity money to buy a football club at top-end value, albeit when Man United are being told they can go for 7 billion quid, that's arguable. And then you look at the argument around what he's doing, he's trying to commercialise his thinking. If you look at what Chelsea have done over the last 5 years, between 17 and 21, they've actually had a net depreciation, Kieran, of about £50 million a season. They've sold players at a £410 million profit, and they've had £650 million of a depreciation. So every year, when they buy players, it's costing them 50 million quid. If their turnover is £400 million a year, they're operating right on the margins. What I can't see is a 22 accounts, because the way that financial fair play works, Kieran, we both know this quite well, is a rolling 3-year cycle. So this year's accounts will be quite important for Chelsea if they're going to be able to find their way around financial fair play, given in 2021 they lost 152 million quid. Now, there'll be a significant raft of allowable adjustments in there for COVID and other bits and bobs that may have featured in those accounts, but I still think they're going to be nip and tuck on the 105 million that they're allowed to lose every 3 seasons, alongside the fact they actually aren't allowed to lose virtually anything to compete in the Champions League. What say you, Kieran?
I think they are fairly close to the limits as far as 22 is concerned. But remember, they sold Abrahams and they sold Tomori, which both players came through the academy.
Bank big profits,
£70 million pounds. Paul, that's fixed the problem. Absolutely.
Yeah. Kieran, I want to jump in. What should we read into the way Brighton are behaving at the moment? I mean, is this to be admired? Arsenal come in with a bid. They fail to get Moises Caicedo, so they thought, right, we need to go back in with more. So they did, 70 million. Brighton said yesterday, and they're standing firm today, he's not going anywhere. Brighton saying no to 70 million for a player they bought for just over 4.
Well, Tony Bloom is a very successful businessman. What does Tony Bloom want most of all? It's to see Brighton play in Europe. And Moises Caicedo will go in the summer. There's no doubt about that. And he'll probably still go for at least 60 to 70 million. If he can play for the rest of the season, provided he is focused, get Brighton, even if it's a European Conference competition, from Tony Bloom's perspective, given that he took over the club when it was playing in an athletics track in League One, that would be his objective achieved.
Yeah. I'm looking at the figures, Kieran. We're currently at 511 million. So we could add another 115 million onto that, as and when Chelsea secure the services of Enzo Fernandez in Lisbon today. This is going to be a record that boggles the eye, to be quite frank with you. And yet in the next window, do you think we'll see even more records set?
I think, as Simon intimated, that having spent £2.5 billion on buying the club, Todd Boehly wants Chelsea now to fit into his vision of football. We did see very similar with regards to Roman Abramovich acquiring Chelsea in 2003. And if you look at the inflation-adjusted, football inflation-adjusted figures for Abramovich's first season, he spent 692. Yeah, so very, very similar. Effectively, back the managers, back the coaches, back the advisors, and try to reinvigorate the club with a new design, and that's Todd Boehly's approach. And he feels that on the back of that, commercial partners will be prepared to pay more money. Chelsea have sponsorship deals coming up for renewal, and they'll be able to leverage on the back of that.
How should Chelsea fans listening to us this morning, and they're all getting in touch this morning, so too Arsenal fans, Kieran, specifically Chelsea, if they take a step back, they were extremely nervous when Abramovich left the building and indeed left the country, seemingly for good. So how should they view this American ownership?
It's a high risk, potentially high reward strategy. If the players that have been recruited increase in value, then Chelsea have the benefit of having them locked into long contracts on wages structures, which will have certain step ups, but they will probably be cheaper than having to go out into the market or 3 or 4 years. If it comes off, Todd Boehly will be hailed a genius. If it doesn't, it's going to create a huge anchor going forwards, because what happens if you've got these players on £6 or £7 million a year contracts who can't get the same money elsewhere? They'll be quite happy sitting at home playing on their Xbox rather than moving to another club. And I think that's where the problems could lie.
Yeah. Football finance expert Kieran Maguire, you're going to be a busy man today. You are all the time. I know that, but especially so today. Kieran, thank you so much.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.